This meeting is now streaming. Hello, hello, hello. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you? Oops, I guess it helps if I turn the camera on, right? Welcome to the next edition of A Glimpse of the Moon, deepening and furthering your understanding of what I think through as clients come in on the body to the studio, how they deal with the body. Multitasking here. I got to make sure I got Facebook up in case people have questions. Posts. I don't know how that works. Okay, so let's get going. Go over here, make sure that's good. Okay, so we're talking about the hamstrings today, also known as the back of your leg. Okay, so this muscle back here. So little anatomy lesson first. Of course I have pictures, right? It's so much fun to do live. All right, so here is your hamstrings. So it's important to note that hamstrings cross two joints. Okay, so we can take a layer out of there. All right, so they cross the knee joint. You can see that down here. So these are your hamstrings right here. And then you got two of them right here. And then this is the belly of one. I got a little bit of it out here. So those are hamstrings. And you will notice that they touch on your sits bones. There we go. Okay, sorry, the layer. So this is joint number one. Okay, so remember here and here. Let's take a look at Skeletor. Okay, got Skeletor. All right, so here is where it attaches. This is your sits bone. Okay, attaches on the back side. This is the back side here. And then it attaches across the knee. It is a two joint muscle, which therefore complicates things. Again, I've been doing this for 30 years and I get people arguing with me. I do squats and lunges, I get my hamstrings. You're getting one joint action that the hamstring does, you don't get the second. So if you don't have the second joint action covered, and we'll talk about those in here in a minute, it increases your likelihood of injury. If you are having hamstring cramps, typically it's weakness of the hamstring at that second joint. Okay, so at the hip, your hamstring does extension. It takes the leg behind you. So you're pushing off to run. It also does, move back a little farther, knee flexion. Oh, I think this leg is balanced on. Okay, so it bends the knee so the heel lifts toward the butt. So the best way to get the whole hamstring strengthened is to both have hip extension and knee flexion. So if you're doing squats, okay, so I have hip flexion on the way down. So I'm working extension on the way up, okay? So that's continuation if I did that. So flexion down, working against gravity, it's coming up. But what's happening at the knee? So I'm starting out in that bent knee position, right? Which means my hamstring is lengthening under tension at the knee. So you have this whole pulley system being worked. So in order to really effectively stretch it, you need to move both joints simultaneously or have one in the fixed position and then you're getting the other one to move. All right, so same thing with lunges. Lunges are just a split stance. Doesn't matter which knee you're looking at. They're both bent. They both straighten at the knee. Both hips are going into extension. Okay, so again, yes, we're getting hamstrings, but we're getting hamstrings across the hip. If you start strengthening hamstring across the knee joint, it's going to make a huge difference. So you're already doing all these lunges and squats. So it is important to isolate hamstring across the knee joint. How do you do that? So one way, if you're just starting out, this is plenty. So the knee needs to be back and then you're bringing your heel to your hip. If your knee is side by side right now because you're tight through the hip flexor, that's fine. You're bending the knee, straightening the knee. Okay, so we may not have the second joint action, but we have the first joint action. We have movement at the knee, hamstrings at the knee. So that's one. If you're at a gym, they tend to have a seated hamstring curl. Okay, so you're bending the knee against resistance, the pad goes here, you're pulling the heel in towards your hip. That's that second action. They have a face down one. That's also a hamstring curl. And again, it isolates. If you don't have gym membership, say you have a chair with wheels, you have a resistor ball, you have a soccer ball, anything that rolls, you can work the hamstrings. Okay, so again, if we're just focusing on hamstring at the knee, your feet are going to be on top, and you're going to pull the heels to your hips and then release back out. This is the same thing, right? So we're bending the knee against resistance and then straightening it back out. So that is hamstring at the knee. Again, like I said, chair on wheels, any kind of ball. You could use a foam roller, your range of motion may be a little bit different, but that's how you start strengthening hamstrings. If you have a TRX, this guy over here, you can lay on your back, and this serves then as your ball. So the heels are here, you're pulling it in if you're laying on the ground. I'm not going to demonstrate that one because I'd have to reposition the camera. So that is, now you're starting to balance out all those lunges and squats by adding knee flexion against resistance. Okay. Once you figured out that, then there are a few ways that you can get both joint actions happening together. And again, this is life. This is how we work. So run knee, for example, since I'm a run coach, you're pushing off. Okay, you've got that hip extension, that knee comes up. Okay, it's kind of a recoil mechanism, but you're still, that hamstring has to be strong for you to be able to run through. If you're running with your heels really low, one, it could be hamstring strength that's keeping you from lifting those heels and therefore going faster. It could be numerous other things. Okay, so something to work on. All right, so your second set of exercises, the ones that will now incorporate both joint actions, hip extension and knee flexion. We'll start with the standing one. Again, I was demonstrating this earlier. So now your knee has to stay back. That puts you in hip extension and flexion and release. The leg back, bend. Okay, so core is staying stable. I'm moving the femur in the hip socket and release. So again, get the hamstring to engage at the hip, then it engages at the knee. Can you switch it around? Can I engage it at the knee, then the hip? Sure. Engage at the knee, then the hip. Again, getting both joint actions going. Change up the sequencing, change up how it's done. And again, you get stronger. If we always do it the same way every time, your body adapts. All right, the other way you can do both joint actions. So before I showed you hips are staying still and you're pulling in and out. Okay, so for this one, neck needs to be good. So you should be looking straight ahead. So I'm not going to look at you. And as you pull in, the hips go up and then down. Pull in, hips up and down. So now I've got hip extension as well as that knee flexion. So give it a try. It really does work differently. All right, so that means you've strengthened it, you've worked it out, you will get stronger, you will notice it, it'll improve your performance, it's going to decrease your risk of spasms, decrease your risk of injury to that hamstring. There's a whole other ball of wax that could be why your hamstrings are also having issues if you've got injuries. It could be that whole superficial back line. That's a different story. That's a different glimpse of the moon. But we also need to then stretch it. So I used to be an AFA presenter, and one of the other presenters would tell his group, okay, I'm stretching my hamstrings. Okay, let me get my stool ready. I'm stretching my hamstrings. So we talked about the hamstrings have two joint actions, right? They extend and they flex. Extend the hip, flex the knee. In order to stretch it, you have to do the opposite across all joints. Again, this is a two joint muscle. So this is my strengthening. In order to go opposite, I have to go knee forward, leg straight. Okay, If you are super tight, just pulling the knee to the chest may feel like you're getting the hamstring. That's great. But if you really want to get deeper into that hamstring, it is pressing through on the heel to straighten the knee. So if you focus on pressing through on the heel, everything else just kind of falls into place. The other thing you want to watch for as you press through that heel, oh, do the other leg, my knee's likely balanced enough. Okay, press through that heel is that you want to make sure your hips are square to the front. Okay, so we have hamstrings that go one on the inside, one on the outside. If my hips are cheated open, now I'm getting only inside and inner thigh. Was that my intention here? No. So keep your hips square to the front, press through on the heel, see what happens, and then from there you can hinge forward with a gentle rounding of the spine as you go deeper. Feels totally different. Okay? And you can sit here and work it a little bit. So it doesn't have to be go and hold. It can be, okay, the knee's bent, and now I'm going to press through on the heel. The knee is bent. So these would be dynamic stretches, PNF, if you want to think about it that way. So it's a gentle contract and relax, which gets you farther. So how many of these do you do? Number one, you got to do it slow, and you go until you feel that hamstring release. Again, where are your hips in relationship to your foot? They're pointing the same direction, okay? So hamstrings, they're a two joint muscle. They get a little complicated. Again, you have to have both joint actions addressed for it to be strong. We have other muscles in the body that are also similar, that they're two joint muscles. One is your gastroc, the shape of your calf, okay? It crosses the ankle, it crosses the knee. Your biceps, your triceps, also two joint muscle. So it depends. Optimal shortening is elbow and shoulder flexion. Optimal stretch is behind. But again, if I just want to isolate here, that's great. If I just want to do a little bit of this, that's great. Triceps, same thing. Back here is great, but I also need to do something up here. All right. Again, those are other talks. Anyway, questions, comments, thoughts. Let me go to, let me get the screen. Feel free to always email me if you have questions. Okay, I'm not seeing anything popped up yet. So we are going to call this, oops, and I'm pushing the wrong buttons on my computer. That's not what I want either. There we go. Boom, that's what I want. Boom. Okay, so we're going to call this a day. I appreciate you being here. Again, it's a lot. I've been doing this for 30 years. I used to teach this every weekend for almost 20. So I'm very familiar with this stuff. Okay. Let me share my knowledge with you. Give me some feedback here. How are we doing? All right. Happy Thanksgiving. Be safe. Be smart. And I will see you guys later.